Thank you so much, Nayoka. We just got a few more folks rolling in. And as you're coming in, why doesn't, in the spirit of getting to know each other a little bit, in the chat, drop your name and maybe one word that describes the energy you're calling on in the midst of all of this turmoil that our nation is going through. What energy are you invoking? What characteristic are you developing in yourself? What power are you calling on to prepare yourself for the journey ahead as we deal with, all of the challenges we're facing as a nation? Role model, Manuela, she, her, hers, AFF, and I'm calling on hope. Greg is calling on grace, perseverance, Kelly, yes. Steadiness, Nayoka, yes. Clarity, yes, Tynesha. Unity, yes, Zaida, absolutely. Strength, Lindsay. Oh, Lindsay, you sent it to me privately. Put you in the group. Endurance, yes. Resilience, as you're coming in, drop your name, gender pronouns, organization, and the energy or quality you've been calling on to see you through these times. So I've got resilience, perseverance, endurance, unity. Endurance, Molly. Molly, welcome from across the world in Morocco.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't give you all an ocean view, but I haven't quite figured out all the camera stuff yet. It's so nice to be here. Thank you again for including us.
Absolutely, everyone. That's Molly Schultz Hafid, the new executive director of the Butler Family Fund. Woo! Give it up for Molly. Fantastic. And look, we have Don today. Hi, Don. Welcome. Everybody, this is Don, the president of the Cerner Foundation. As a reminder, everybody, drop your name, your gender pronouns in the chat, your organization, as well as one word to describe the energy that you are calling on to see you through these tough times. So we've got some great submissions, and I think we've got everyone, and we'll be able to get started. So welcome, everybody. My name is Manuela Ciniegas. I'm the director of the Andrews Family Fund. We are delighted to have all of you with us today as we think about ways to strengthen our connections across institutions and make our collective work have more impact. And one of the things that, as a learning board at the Andrews Family Fund, one of the things we've been thinking about is, irrespective of our size and our time in philanthropy, we believe that change is our mandate, our calling, and we've been trying to think about ways not only to develop the leadership of the board members internally, but also to look at ways that the knowledge that they have and the work that they're trying to do can have an impact across institutions so that we can create more alignment and really leverage our impact in the field. And honestly, what that means in plain speak is to build power requires relationships. It's all about relationships. Think of a time when you've ever grown or evolved or done something really hard, done something you're proud of. You probably had somebody supporting you, cheering you on, in partnership with you, teaching you something. None of us can do this by ourselves, and change is possible and necessary in this season. And actually, the type of change that we need to advance is going to require an incredible amount of courage from all of us here. And no man is an island. And it takes all of us in supportive relationship across institutions. The one place that we've seen that those relationships our hardest to cultivate are actually across the trustees, the level of trustees across multiple foundations. So this is our effort to create community amongst trustees, to help you guys serve as resources, to help you serve as sounding boards to each other, to help you engage and commit to long-term learning. We know that the construct of serving on a board is a little bit out of step with the rest of the work and grantees that you guys support. You only see each other 4 times a year. Family foundations maybe have a little more interaction through regular working groups in addition to family interaction. But for the most part, it's really hard to just drop in and make really critical decisions and then have to step away and only get to see each other 4 times a year. So we're trying to break that by developing personal relationships and encouraging all of you to get to know each other, to sit for virtual coffee, to get each other's phone numbers and just be in regular conversation. It's gonna take a lifetime of work to change our current conditions, and we're so happy you're here and signing up for the hard work to learn and transform in this season. It's gonna take all of us. So that being said, I just wanted to turn to Lindsay so you guys could meet our chair, who is actually chairing her very last board meeting today, and see if Lindsay had any thoughts before we get started.
Thanks, Manuela. I think you already said it well, but I just want to add my welcome to all of our guests. We're really excited that you're here. We, as Manuela said, are really looking to build connections with you all to, at the end of the day, help advance our shared goal of, assisting the movement for youth justice and racial justice. And, we know and have been watching through this very difficult season the way that, we're often farthest away from the work that's happening on the ground, and we're not always we're absolutely guilty of not always operating in alignment and connection with our partners. So, here as a learning board of AFF, our culture is one of examination and listening and trying to, learn from and hold up the expertise of those who have that experience and are doing this work. So in today's discussion, I think we encourage questions. There's no one has all the answers, but, we really we're excited you're here with us to explore this, because we really think it's going to take all of us working together. And I think, I'm happy to leave it there. So thanks, Manuela.
Thank you all. I wanted to also introduce you to our new board chair, Cece, who will be starting at the end of this board meeting, but in the spirit of continuing relationships with all of you. Cece, is there anything you want to say to everyone as you welcome them?
No, just welcome and thank you for spending your Sunday with us. Just so excited to have all of you here and to really go deeper into these conversations and our relationships. Thank you.
DC, thank you so much. Now, Saida, can you turn to the norms slide? The AFF community has a series of norms that we try to embrace every time we come together, and just wanted to give you a chance to take a quick peek at them. We try to create a safe space where people stay present. So we know that the talking about race is not something that we've all been taught to do in certain communities across races. And so we want you to stay present even in the times when something comes up that feels really uncomfortable. Stay positive, stay open to change, be patient with yourself. If there's an idea that you don't quite relate to or understand, search for understanding, right? Step up and ask questions if you're the shy one usually. Step back if you're the verbose one like me. Challenge ideas and not people. Assume no harm. Try to work to be comfortable with discomfort. Think about quality over quantity. And then our favorite from our fellow board member, Duncan from the UK, have fun and be cheerful. Thank you, Duncan. Great, so let's go to the next slide. This session today is entitled, it's showing up for racial justice, right? What have we learned as resource organizers, whether we're trustees or program officers, about what it means to organize resources to be responsive to movements in this season. And we are blessed today to have two powerful speakers who can talk a little bit about not just their various professional roles, but also their identities in the context of the work that they're doing, so that there will be an open conversation for all of us to think about the personal qualities, the strategic orientations, concrete ideas that we can pursue, and then also the work and the questions that we actually need to leave with and take into our personal and collective work together. So this is a chance for us to just raise all of the wisdom that folks have been acquiring in the last, not only your entire career, but especially in the last 6 months. This has been a really challenging time for a number of reasons, and we wanted to create space for people to kind of reflect on what people are learning in this season. So before we move to our really powerful guests, I wanted to invite into the space two AFF board members to share their reflections about what they have learned in the last 3 or 4 months around holding their role either as program officers at foundations or as family trustees who have been trying to really live our mission of showing up for Black communities, showing up for BIPOC communities, showing up for low-income communities, supporting our grantee partners and advancing racial justice. So I'm going to start with Megan Kelly. So if we could go back to the screen where we can see everybody. Megan, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to share a little bit of your personal story. So feel free to jump in.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcoming you all again. It's so nice to have you here with us on your Sunday. So a little context of what I'm going to talk about. I was asked by Manuela to share some around my experience in the last few months in donor organizing and in anti-racism work, and to speak specifically to my fellow white board members and guests about the work I'm committed to doing and I'm excited to learn with you all about doing today in this session. I want to start by sharing a quote from the wonderful Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams from a recent interview in which the Reverend was asked about the moment we are in as a nation. I'm also going to put this in the chat so you can read it at your own pace. We had an amazing, extraordinary, painful, and yet collective experience of a sufficient quieting that allowed us to feel this collective body that we are in as a nation. And that's a whole bunch of individual bodies in there that said, enough, I can't tolerate what is here because I can feel it now, I can see it. And the uprisings and the particular potency of George Floyd's, not only his death, the means of his death and the expression of his death. And I mean that literally the expression, the physical embodiment, the expression on the officer's face, the expression of his death through the media. The expression of his death was too much for this body to continue to bear. In the days following the murder of George Floyd, I started to see a collective change that Angel Kyoto Williams speaks of. I saw friends, family, random Facebook acquaintances from freshman year orientation speaking up and saying enough, saying what Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other people in communities of color had been saying for too long and what had been ignored by these same people for too long. These same white people. And while my fear was telling me to do nothing, I was perpetuating racism and harmful practices by feeling that paralysis. I wanted to do more than donate, post, and protest. I wanted to seize this moment of reckoning from white people in my network and community. So immediately after George Floyd's murder, I had friends from all over the country reaching out and asking me where to give and what to do. I'm from Minneapolis, and some of them knew that I had ties to the organizing community there. And so I reached out to my friends that were on the ground and got emails and information out as broadly as I could about where to move resources immediately. Great, but not enough. I turned to AFF board and expertise. I told Manuela that I was interested in learning more about Black-led organizing efforts in this moment. And she told me about a funder briefing, a call from Movement for Black Lives to raise $50 million from Philanthropy. Partnering with a friend who pushed me to ask in big, uncomfortable, and bold ways, and collaborating with fellow board members to match donations from their friends and family, we raised $33,000 in one-time contributions and $25,000 in committed contributions over the next year. My ask of people was more than a substantial contribution. It was to commit to giving monthly and to engage in a learning journey with me. and to meaningfully support Movement for Black Lives by showing up in solidarity with them, their partners, and their actions. And I was met with really varying responses. I had a family member get really stuck on the return on investment and told me I got too emotional when talking about the importance of giving to movement building and organizing. And I also had a friend that just reached out to me yesterday and told me he wrote Movement for Black Lives into his will, and he's joining in all our future organizing efforts. So there were some wins and some losses, and the losses, I think, with family members are really very hard ones. As I've tried to show up for Movement for Black Lives, I have witnessed and learned so much about this transformational ecosystem of Black-led organizations and organizers. From their introduction to the Breathe Act to the Black National Convention, which was a celebration of Black joy and Black genius and Black lives, and an education around abolition and testament to the coalition's organizing power. I'm constantly struggling with the feeling that I can do anything meaningful or that I will do the wrong thing. I realize that this isn't true and it's actually really, really harmful. I know that we need to advance justice in power in communities. I know that the systems in place are unfair, that they're violent, and that they're there to protect white supremacy. I know we need to resource young people and to resource movement. I know I need to do so much more to commit to my own personal anti-racist work, to have tough conversations, to mobilize, move resources into community, and I'm really committed to showing up for this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan, for sharing your personal journey. It's really personal and intimate, right? And in your journey, there's learnings for all of us here. Also, can y'all just snap for Megan? She is not the public speaker lover. So this was huge. So grateful. Now I want to turn to Ray. Ray is part of our inaugural class of community board members. And Ray, I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about what you've learned and what it's felt like for you as a Black person working in philanthropy in the criminal justice space to show up for movements in this season.
Thank you, Manuela. And I just want to say thanks for firing us up this morning, Megan. You know, for me personally, I've had a difficult time, honestly, showing up in this work. As many of you know, I've worked at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for the past 2 years. A lot of the work that I've been doing there has been around interrogating issues of race, class, gender, and how they show up in the work and how it doesn't show up sometimes in our grant making. And for me, the experience of the murder of George Floyd really became a tipping point for many of us at CZI, many Black employees who felt that in the wake of this event, CZI really wished to portray itself as a social justice funder for whom Black lives matter. And that didn't always align with the experiences of Black employees at CZI, myself included. We began organizing towards drafting a collective letter from Black employees to let leadership know that, if you really want to stand for Black lives, here are some ways you can do so for your employees. Here are some ways that you can do so for your grantees. That was not received very well. We had conversations following that. And ultimately, to the extent that I can speak about it, my last day at CZI was August 31st. So one, I would invite anyone who wants to kind of understand more about the context of that to definitely read the Washington Post article that came out about a month ago. But I really wanted to focus on, in part, the risk of speaking about this, but also the risk of leaving my job at this time. These were definitely things that weighed heavily on me. But at the same time, I have been just so, I felt enveloped really by support. And in large part, people on this call who have just shown up for me. And I think that, that has really been rewarding. And in some ways, it's just very healing. I think that, as Black person in philanthropy, we do this work with the hope that we're going to move the needle. We understand that we're entering spaces that we, by design, we're not meant to be in. And I think that in doing that, you take on these risks and you take on certain compromises. But it's always hard to calculate where that line is. Where do you take that stand? And for me, I felt like this was that moment, and I'm just so grateful to have a cohort of people that I can speak to about these issues and know that they land and that they align with the collective of where this board sits. But two, to know that there are other people who are walking this path too and willing to support and help me. So I just want to be really clear. I'm grateful for all of you and grateful for this space.
Thank you, Ray. We could just take a deep breath and take in what both Megan and Ray have shared with us. If you have a piece of paper and a pen nearby, feel free to keep it next to you and jot down anything that they said that resonated with your personal journey in the last 6 months. And as you notice what really sparked energy for you in your body, just sit with that and write it down for 1 second. I don't want you to lose that, because it's often through walking side by side with the journey of others that we learn about ourselves. So I want to turn to Erin Haney, the Director of Showing Up for Racial Justice. Erin, we're so delighted and honored, honestly, that you would be here with us on a Sunday. So first of all, thank you.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. So Erin, can you tell us a little bit about you and your organization, and what has it meant to organize the community that you focus on in this era? Both why must it happen and what is at stake?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and really, really glad to be here. And yeah, Ray and Megan, thanks for grounding us and kicking us off. So yeah, Showing Up for Racial Justice is answering a call that was made, over 60 years ago by the Black Liberation Movement, for those of us who are white to organize our own. And in this era, we really think that the call is the same. There's still much work to be done. So our work at Surge is organizing in majority white communities to bring more white people into supporting Black-led multiracial movements for justice. So we work to build support for abolitionists and campaigns across the country. And we also work to break the power of the right by organizing white people in communities that have the most to gain, white communities that have the most to gain from a change in the status quo, and who we know the right relies on in order to maintain power. And so for us, that means organizing poor white people with disabilities, and in rural communities. And we think this piece of work is not the only piece of work, but it is a really, really important piece of our movement ecosystem. Black organizers and frontline communities have set a really bold and powerful agenda that's going to get us all free. And sadly, white silence is one of the greatest barriers to winning this agenda. Or sometimes white communities are actually engaged in opposing this agenda. And so for those of us who are white, it's more likely than not that the places we come from, the communities we come from, are either actively opposed or silent about the demands of folks on the front lines. I remember realizing this most boldly during the Ferguson uprisings, when I saw the people around me. I was like inspired by what was happening in the streets there, working class Black folks leading the way. And I remember so many people in my social circles really being challenged and opposing that really powerful organizing that was happening. And so, those of us who are white are, we're often not taught the history of Black liberation or powerful Black movements, but we're also often not taught our own histories of how aggressively our communities have opposed this bold visionary agenda that the Black liberation movement has given us. And so, it's really important that we're organizing majority white communities because our communities hold a disproportionate amount of power. of how gerrymandering and local, state, and federal representation is set up. And also, those of us with wealth hold another kind of disproportionate power. Many of us control and have access to resources that could be used to fuel powerful Black-led movement. So we don't need to organize all white folks, but we do need to organize more folks than we've got now. And it's been a wild time to be doing this work. We're seeing, because of the powerful organizing by the Movement for Black Lives, we're seeing white folks, people of all backgrounds, but white folks in particular, shifting what they believe to be true, right, about race and wanting to show up in new ways. And so for us, that's meant really needing to welcome people and ground them in the fact that the solutions and the infrastructure already exists, and that the invitation is to support the vision and the infrastructure. We're not trying to recreate the wheel. It's meant really needing to believe that people will come along with us, that more people are open to shifting than maybe we thought, and for taking responsibility for organizing our own and pushing ourselves to continue to engage with people over time. And it's also meant, balancing the external work out in the world with the deep and internal work that those of us who are white that need to be doing. Got to be operating at all levels. So I'll pause there.
Ms. Erin, as a clarifying point, what is that deep internal work that you referred to? Like, can you describe the arc of learning or change for people as engaged personally? Yeah,
definitely. So I think some of us, those of us who are white, when we can come into consciousness, we can kind of want to be in the streets all the time, which is beautiful, and we need to be in action. It's one of the core values at Surge. But we have to work, we also have to do deeper internal work as well. So that can look like lots of different things. It can look like intellectual work. So it can look like learning about the history of Black movements, the history of white repression and backlash. It can mean learning more about racial capitalism. It's also doing unlearning work. So like getting really clear about how those of us who are white have internalized dominance or internalized white supremacy, getting really clear about that and more conscious of that, and then working to interrupt it. It can also look like spiritual and embodied work. Megan, I think, mentioned Reverend Angel, who's been definitely someone I have followed and connected with over the years. It's getting really clear about, like, what did I have to give up in order to become white? What have I lost? Who are my ancestors? And what is the work that I need to be doing to reconnect and repair in that way as well? I think the last thing that we are really grounded in at Surge is like getting clear about, like, what's my stake in this work? That we don't want to be showing up to this work just to help other people, but to get really clear about the ways in which white supremacy damages us, harms us. Because when we're clear and grounded in what our stake is, it's less likely that this is going to be a, drop in for the 6 months of the uprising and then go back to usual, back to normal. And so we want to be showing up as white people, clear about what our stake is, humble and grounded, following the leadership of people of color. But we need to be clear about what our stake is in this work as well. So I could talk more about that, but those are some of the threads that we work with at Surge on the individual level.
Thank you so much, Erin. The fact that you're inviting all of us to really see our role and the personal repercussions of not showing up for this right now, I think is important. Like, what is the self-interest here? And often that is a hard question to ask ourselves, especially in philanthropy, especially with the diverse positions that we have in terms of proximity to power. So I appreciate you asking a really scary question, like, what's your personal interest in doing this work and what's at stake for you if you don't? So I want to turn to Tynesha. Tynesha, well, in full transparency, y'all, I'm like a big fangirl of Tynesha for so many reasons. So thank you, sis, for joining this call. I was hoping you could tell people a little bit about yourself. You're a superstar. You're a superstar funder organizer. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your trajectory in philanthropy? And then given this season of triple pandemic, right? What does it mean for all of us to show up for Black lives in this season?
Thank you, Manuela. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Hi, friends. That's a beautiful question. And I want to start it. And I want to first just honor that my spirit is both heavy and activated with the passing of RBG. And so it is on my heart. And I wanted to name that, that it's on my heart. My trajectory, Lord, in philanthropy, I'm an honest person, so I will tell you a quick, honest story. I wanted to, from the very early ages of my life, even as a child, like I felt this strong commitment to be a part of like doing good in the world, right? Like I wanted to be a part of creating meaningful change. I saw myself as like the girl that needed to help others in righting great wrongs that annoyed teachers, annoyed my parents. But I just felt like that was my mandate. And then it turned into, once I got into a place of being really politicized, I wanted to be a part of liberation work. And so when I got into the business of moving resources, I felt like I had to separate parts of myself, like as though moving resources to my people wasn't a mandate for justice and change. And did a lot of that work, that heart work, that spirit work, and that political work to acknowledge that my role in moving resources, one of them, financial resources, and there are other resources, but moving that kind of resources, that energy towards movements, not just towards the movement building, the power building, which is important and an honor to do that work, but also moving resources so that leadership within our movements, including ourselves, our spirits don't have to be, can be shored up at the same time. Because too often we resource labor, we don't resource leadership, and we sure don't resource people to be whole. And so what is it? So I got to a place in my career where I realized, oh, that is my political mandate right now that the ancestors and my people need me to do and be, which is to move resources to movements and with movements, because movements deserve resources so that we can win and be whole. And so I spent 10 years getting to that place. I've been in local philanthropy. I've been in very issue-specific philanthropy. And then my last body of work, which in the sector more formally, which was at the Novo Foundation for 5 years. And I have lots of lessons I've learned there. And this question on what this moment has called on me and then what it's called on us, I want to thank Ray and Megan for what they shared. So much of what you both shared is my story. So I transitioned out of my role at Novo at the end of June during the midst of all of what we see. And immediately, a month before I left my position at Novo, joined the team more formally of the Movement for Black Lives to really design and help manage what we're calling resource strategy for winning. And I think that's what it's calling on us, y'all. It's been calling on us, this thing, which is we got to put it all on the line. And I feel that even as I say that, I feel it in my spirit. We've got to put it on the line. You know, there was movements have taught me that we have to fight like we know we can win in this generation. That's real. Not that we're doing it for generations ahead and ahead and ahead. We're thinking about our generations are from generations from now, but we have to fight like we know we can win now, and believe that, and use and have that kind of sense of urgency and that energy. And that does require. So I want to talk about Black folks in philanthropy who are on a different kind of front line. It requires us to put all things on the line. And so one of the things I want to honor is that a part of what that requires is there's not rest for a lot of us who are in this moment. And so I'll talk a little quickly about why I think I want to have a whole spirit. I want to always have a whole spirit, but we have to put it on the line. And so what it means for us who have access to institutional power and wealth is a really powerful question. I think we have to challenge and question, and I've said this on calls before, what are the rules that we now know we need to break, because those rules were created in order to protect a sector or to protect institutions. And to put all of it on the line is we don't need to protect an institution or a sector, we have to protect movements. We have to protect leadership. And so it challenges us to question things that don't work and let them go. It requires us to suspend the need for clarity. We don't need to know everything a movement is doing, everything a people is doing, everything around liberation work. We have to suspend that need for clarity. All we have to do is trust and believe, and trust and believe in leadership. And then the last part, and then I'll be quiet, is this moment is requiring us to recognize that actually, as folks have mentioned before, like all of our liberation is tied into this moment. So even though right now we're talking about defending, as an example, Black life, our humanity, all of that is on the line. And so when we fight for Black liberation, when we fight for the liberation of folks who've been so vulnerable now and forever, it actually means our entire spirits, our humanities need to be liberated, because regardless of where you stand on the spectrum of power, we are all tied in cages in this moment. And the exciting opportunity is like Black liberation means liberation for everybody on this call, because that means we can live our fullest and most expansive humanities, and systems of oppression don't allow for that to be possible. So we're on the line for that too. And so I'll be quiet because I know I said a lot of things, but thank you for inviting.
Thank you, Tynesha. Never be quiet. Every time you talk, I learn so much. So I'm just so grateful for your wisdom here. Erin, can you talk? Let's get down into the weeds of the work of really showing up. So Tynesha's putting out a really bold invitation that we put everything on the line. I think, in the last 6 months, and I say this with all of the love and as honest and loving as I can, this has been the hardest time I've ever had working in philanthropy. And I've only been in the sector 6 years or so. I'm a baby compared to you, Don and Edgar and folks. But it's been really painful. And I think there were a number of reasons why, and it had to do with the process of holding the suffering of the communities we're here to serve. And the ways in which we do our work often don't create space for the knowledge and wisdom that lives in emotions, and the knowledge and lived experience and connections to real young people, to real organizers, to real communities. Some of the folks that our colleagues are funding are actually people that I grew up with professionally. And I know what it means to do some of their work, not to the degree that they are living it, but I see their sacrifice. I've seen them show up to meetings with the kids, and they haven't gone to the doctor in 3 years, and they're not well, and they're still out there doing this for everybody else. And I felt such a disconnect between our sector and our boardroom and these lived experiences. I want to talk to you, Erin, about what it has meant to walk white folks on the journey who have felt the pain and seen the pain and are trying to show up. What are the different layers of learning that you've walked and supported them through to be as aligned and as supportive as possible for movements?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to help folks move through the work on many, many levels. I mean, we need to be doing our work on the individual level, right? That deep work that I just spoke about, but also being in action to really be out to address and build power for the very bold and clear solutions that have been set, right, by folks who are most directly impacted. So we've got to be doing the work at both levels. And so as folks come in, we're working to weave skills analysis and that deeper embodiment. We're trying to work all 3 levels as folks come to us. And, folks are coming to us in all different, points along the journey, right? So some folks, and so that's just the reality of how the work works. So we're doing skill building, hard skill building. So how do we get the capacity and to be able to have hard conversations and to bring new people into the work, because it's not okay for us just to show up as individuals. That might be our first step, but our work is actually to bring more of our people along with us. So how do we have hard conversations? How do we build the skill and capacity to change people's minds, right, over time? How are we, engaging those hard organizing skills That's the first piece of it. Second is like deep political education with people. So there's so much that we didn't learn, right? And so it's a lot of political education. Yeah, a lot of political education. And then the third piece is that deeper embodied piece that I spoke about earlier. How are we sitting with discomfort? How are we doing the self-interrogation? And, you know, a lot of this work is not linear, right? We take a couple steps back. We take a couple steps forward to take a couple steps back. This is not linear. This is really about making a commitment to a lifetime of anti-racist work. And so those are kind of the three threads that we're moving people along.
Awesome. And then I'm going to turn to Tynesha, and then we're going to open it up for questions, guys. So if you have a question that has come up or something you want to expand upon, drop it in the chat, and I'll do my very best to pick and get it into the collective space. Tynesha, you have put together such a number of like really audacious, powerful initiatives, including this fund of $1 billion for Black girls that just launched recently. And as a true organizer, that's my mom, y'all. She is persistent. I love you, Mom. I'll call you later. As a true organizer, right? In so many different spaces, helping educate and help funders come along the journey. Can you talk a little bit about what you think, what are the patterns that either individual funders, institutions in the sector has to really interrupt and change so that we can truly be here to support movements?
Thank you, Manuela. I'm gonna say 3. That's my magic number. So even if I have the first 2, the third one's gonna come magically. So the first I named is around suspending the need for clarity. Yo, that is real. Even like for me as someone who's been in multiple different roles, like the idea that I need to know every single detail in order to feel comfortable. And comfort is not the goal, right? When we're trying to resource movements, because if we're working to be comfortable, to resource a movement that's supposed to transform the world, it's never really going to happen. And so I think it's suspending the desire for comfort and clarity and moving at the speed of trust. And really acknowledging like, I don't actually have to know all these things in order to really move and believe that I need to trust and resource this leadership in order to really profoundly support liberation work. So I think that's the first, and as a Black woman in philanthropy, I've struggled with that. I think the second is what's really hard about about the sector, and I think we'll struggle is what are the ways that we relinquish power, right? And so if we believe that white supremacy and we believe that like patriarchy are these systems that are harmful, and we are trying to figure out all these ways in order to dismantle, what it is the concentration of power. And so how do we think about how the concentration of power shows up within our sector, and how do we play our part in really engaging and trying to like challenge that? So those are things from really, again, like suspending clarity, really trusting leadership, really thinking about grant making and how are we making sure that we're engaging voices at the table around decision making at all levels. It also means like how are the relationships between staffs and trustees and all that, how are we really creating solidarity and some shared power? So I think that is a really powerful second piece. And I think the third piece is what we're talking about is like really saying like what rules am I prepared to break? One of the things about our sector that we know is that, we made up a bunch of rules in order for our sector to really be able to understand how to do our work, what we consider well and professional. But those rules don't really matter, right? And so I think of, and I'll leave it with this story or this, what's on my spirit, the names we know in terms of great revolutionaries and the names we don't. I'm going to call on Harriet because it's a name that we know and that is really important and who has done so much. Is that what rules would we have asked Harriet to follow? What rules would we have had to followed in order to resource Harriet so that she can work to get people free? For real. Like what would we have asked Harriet to do in order to make sure that we can release those dollars so that she can make sure the Underground Railroad was moving quickly? Would we have asked her, can you please tell me where the railroads are? Actually submit it in this form, and then also let me know how many people are going and then what's your outputs. We wouldn't have. It's not in our spirit to even think about that. So we are existing among liberators now, and we are the participators of supporting folks in that liberation work. Is that what rules are we prepared to break so that when folks call on us as we become ancestors, that they say that we created the space so that folks can be about the business of liberation, and we moved resources and energy in the best ways possible so that we can play our part more meaningfully. And so I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Tynesha. And so now we're going to open it up for questions. Tynesha's last comment kind of pointed to something that Megan said to me as she was preparing for her sharing this morning. And it was, Manuela, part of what's uncomfortable about sharing, Megan, let me know if it's okay to say this, is, there's a way in which talking about my journey centers whiteness, when right now, what we're all trying to do is figure out ways to center people of color, Black folks, directly impacted communities in all of our conversations. And so if our decisions are about, is this going to make the board members comfortable? Is this helping make sure I'm at clarity? We are in a sector where we have been raised to behave and show up in that way. And the opportunity of interruption is really where the breakthrough happens. And so what's our disposition to dissenting opinion, to interruption, to a challenge, to an invitation to do things differently? What do we need to have built as a culture to actually embrace that so that we can actually be who we say we're going to be? So I just wanted to share that's very personal work. My team asked, they, unbeknownst or directly are like, hey, why are we doing it like this? Or what's happening here? And learning to be comfortable with that, particularly on our team as an all women of color team, is a journey in itself, right? Because it's not how we were raised to show up in professional spaces. So I'm gonna turn to your questions. Lindsay, how do we or others call that question? Who gets to call that question? How do we make that reckoning come about in philanthropy? Can you say a little more about that, Lindsay?
Yeah, I was reacting to the last thing that you said, Tynesha, which is, that there has to be a breaking of the rules, right? And that there are these rules. But I think that, Megan's point about, or the point that Manuela just articulated, that a lot of that conversation seems to center whiteness. And at the same time, there's to me, that it feels like so often the onus is on the partner on the ground to call the question in our community about moving these resources. And that obviously isn't the right answer either. And I think so I think process-wise, I struggle with, and I would love your thoughts on, how do we bring this about? And I know, Erin, since you're working in the funder organizing space, like, how do we really sort of accelerate this? I mean, what's the role that trustees play? I work on the grant making side in a different issue area, on the grant receiving side in a different issue area, and I see this same dynamic at play all the time. So I'm always, wondering, how do we find that? How do we actually unpack that and make that steps forward in that, what is I think a really big shift for the philanthropic sector?
I can jump in. Thank you for that question. Sometimes we can say these things, you're like, how do we do that though? What's the first step? One of the things I think, some of it is, and I say this with so much meaningful love, even thinking about the work that I've done, some of it we already know. You know what I mean? Like, say in the back of the heads, we just think we can't do it. So an example is our reporting requirements. Most of us have heard that either in staff meetings or in trustee conversations, or from the organizations who have already told us. And so some of it is like really reflecting on it. If we had to generate the things that we know are actually putting more labor on movements, or we know actually aren't even helpful for us, but we do it because it's a thing that we've always done, I think we'd surface a lot of those things that we can begin questioning. I think the second, Manuela already echoed this, said this in a really beautiful way, is I think if we created spaces of principled struggle even within our philanthropic organizations, at the trustee level, with the staff, all of that, like a place where we can actually really disagree, Like we can struggle with each other. We can say that thing that we're normally afraid to say because it's the thing that we've always done. I think there's a lot of that wisdom already existing in our organizations, so that we can say, we can list those things out. And I think that the third is again, like we don't want to put more labor on movements to be able to answer the questions, but I do think it does require, and I think, to be honest, IFF does such a beautiful job at this, is being authentic, meaningful, loving relationships with movement. Like, and so that it's not an extractive thing where we're making the movement answer questions. We're in relationship. These are our friends. These are our partners. It's the folks that we care about. And so we can struggle with folks in a different way where it's not so labor intensive, it's relationship. And there's so many folks on this call that do that so well. So I think it's calling on our relationships to tell us the truth about how we can show up better. And they know, because we believe in principled struggle, they can be really honest with us. And the consequence isn't going to be about lack of resources.
So feel free to jump in. You guys. Go ahead, Erin.
I'm good. I just wanted to respond to the piece about, like, I don't want to center myself. I hear that. I feel that on such a deep level. And I think, you know, being a white anti-racist person is to live into contradiction, right? And to stay in the work while in contradiction. You know, and I think there's no resolving some of it, right? Those of us who are white are being called to put it on the line, to take bolder action. And at the same time, we're working to reprogram ourselves to follow the leadership of people of color. And really, we have to be doing both at the same time, right? And we know that in this work as white folks, we are going to make mistakes. We are so deeply conditioned by white supremacy. And so what we don't want to do is stay frozen, right? And we want to stay in action. And so just would, remind folks that we are going to make mistakes in this work, and that, we're living in contradiction. We're trying to do two things at the same time. And there's really no resolving that. It's about how do we stay in the work, right? In work that's not always super clear. Yeah.
Thank you, Erin. I'm looking at the time, and I'm wondering if folks feel that they have an additional 15, 20 minutes to stay on and talk a little bit longer. If you're okay with that. If you have to leave, we totally support that. But if other folks want to stay for another 15, 20 minutes, can I get a thumbs up? Okay. Okay, no worries if you've got to go, but thank you. So in addition to questions, comments, like, is there a little uncomfortable tickling in your chest that wants to say something? This is the space, so we can support each other. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thanks, Manuela, and thanks for including me in this amazing circle, or squares, I guess. I just am so inspired by this conversation, and it resonates because it's pretty much the calling I have felt in the roles that I play in this sector, not just on a certain board, but on the boards of the National Center for Family Philanthropy, in being a consultant and working with different family foundations around the country. The goal is not to work with rich white people. The goal is to shift power. The goal in my calling is to shift power. And so my question is, and maybe Tynesha and Erin, it's a blend, it's a combination of both of you. It's like, have the two of you come together to do this work? Who are your partners in this work? How are you reaching these power constructs like boards, trustees, right? That are the hardest to reach in this sector. And I am looking to help build pathways to reach those constructs, as much as I can. And so who are your partners in reaching kind of the concentration areas of power like trustees? And who's missing and who haven't you been able to get on board on this, in this movement that you're both leading? And how can, I think, all of us help? And I have other thoughts that I can share offline, and because I would love to support this effort. So I welcome your thoughts about partners and reaching the power for decision making and change.
Erin, do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
All right, you kick it off.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna say the thing I'm not supposed to say, right? I think the first thing is Erin and I haven't worked together, but I know that Erin has worked with a lot of folks across the movement. But that means we should. I have I have experience, my colleagues and comrades have had experience working at the trustee level. I think the one thing I do want to name is the challenge of when folks are prepared to relinquish power, but then they change their mind. And so that is one thing I just want to honor and hold. Like, to relinquish power isn't a temporary acceptance that I need to partner in a much more meaningful way. It can't be temporary. And so that's the one piece of opportunity that I'm leading myself into learning. But I'll use one example of that the movement is working on right now, and FreeBL is working on right now, is with the Colibri Foundation, and I have their permission to share it. But the Farbman family intergenerationally have been organizing around supporting racial justice work, and has committed to the movement over 10 years. Like, that is and at significantly higher levels than they're typically doing. And that is an example. And they're organizing other families across father, son, children, family, partner, all that. They're across generations to get other families to commit to the movement for 10 years. And so that's an example of a relinquishing. It's like, I don't know what the movement's going to do 5 years from now, but I know they deserve my resources and support. And so that has been one example that I'll lift up, the Farbman family. And we've been organizing, like literally we're in meetings organizing other families together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. Surge doesn't do a tremendous amount of donor organizing. We do a lot of connecting people who come to us to movement partners. But we don't do a tremendous amount of that. I would say in the last 6 months, we've gotten a lot of interest from family foundations and philanthropy about wanting to engage and do a deeper level of work internally. And so we're certainly open to supporting those efforts, and want to be in alignment and moving with the Movement for Black Lives, who I think is doing some of the is doing the best donor organizing right now. So I think I don't know that it's not our bread and butter what we do every day in and day out, but I think it's really, really important in service of building strong movements. So would be excited about continuing that conversation.
Just to follow up though, Erin, but you to scale this movement of yours, how are you going about that? How are you thinking about that? Are there, maybe it's not donor organizing, but are there other networks and movement builders that way that can reach white dominant spaces for change? And so that's really, where does this intersect for you?
Yeah. There are a lot of really good groups that do this kind of work with majority white institutions. One organization I'll lift up is the Catalyst Project that has been doing deep work with majority white institutions for at least 15 years. Catalyst Project helped found Surge about a decade ago, and they do deep, rigorous work with majority white institutions. We have a number of people on our staff and on our board who are connected to other groups that do more work with institutions. Dismantling Racism Collective, there's a whole range of organizations that do this kind of organizational transformation work. And and so we'd be happy to connect folks with a fuller list if that's something anybody's interested in moving.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just to name, all of those groups are also deeply connected to organizations led by people of color. It's not like white folks off in the corner doing their thing, but deeply connected in critical race theory, the long history of organizing and movements in this moment. So yeah.
Thank you guys. Greg, can you bring your question to the group?
Yeah, so I think my question that I have is, we've been having a lot of conversations at AFF and at the certain level about increased spending, and it seems like a lot of the conversations tend to be very centered around sustaining the foundation as a tool for the family, as opposed to actually, supporting movements and our actual missions and stuff. So I've got some questions, I guess, or looking for examples of just like, how do we combat that? Because that's the frustrating wall that we keep hitting, I think, of who are we accountable for? And it seems like a lot of the conversations are more around we're more accountable to the endowment, which I guess is, a fiduciary responsibility of the board, but also, changing that conversation, because it always kind of veers that way as opposed to thinking about, like, what are we actually trying to do as a foundation, I guess is where I'm going at.
And I see Jennifer over at Butler. I'm wondering if you have any follow-up. I saw your reaction. Looks like you might have some additional layers to share.
I support what he says, and the time is now, the time is now for us to get involved and put everything in. That's my personal feeling. And I will continue to express that at the board meetings. Thank you for all that you are doing. It's amazing.
I will jump in here. Ooh, I know I'm on the right call when this is the conversation and the questions. Hello. I think what we're grappling with is permanence and legacy. What are we trying to keep permanent, and what do we want our legacy to be? And we are in a space where what we're trying to keep permanent are institutions. Are these spaces for us to be able to do the things and move the resources for forever. And then it's the legacy, like what does it mean? What kind of legacy do families want, right? And the legacy is often tied to being around forever, having institutions and structures that are around forever. And I think that is historic. That is that is generational, right? And I think that the question now is, it's the biggest shift, right, is saying what's more important than the permanence of an institution that is honoring our body of work or this family. It is like what's permanent, what we want permanent are people. What we want permanent is the ability to sustain, our ability to believe in liberation. What we want to be permanent are these movements, so that until one day where liberation is necessary, where these movements aren't even needed in the same ways anymore. And so that's the invitation now. What a gift that, as hard as this year has been, like the invitation is that this gets to be our legacy, right? Not that we created something that is around forever, but that we moved in a way where people's lives, where people can exist in permanence, that their communities can exist in permanence, and that gets to be a family's legacy, right? That they participated at their fullest extent, right? That gets to be an organization's legacy. So I think that is the grapple. There's a deep shift on what we want to make permanent and what we want our legacy to be. And I don't think that that's not for the faint of heart. It is hard work. And it takes for a really complicated, beautiful, principled struggle across families, across generations, and across organizations.
Thank you, Tynesha. Not for the faint of heart, as my heart is racing, listening to you all talk. Cece, I saw you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, just, I mean, this conversation is so on point this morning. It's just a conversation that needs to be had. And it's just from all of the comments and the questions, it's a good reminder as to why so many of us are in this work. And that, I mean, Tynesha, the piece that you said around the relinquishing of power, but the temporariness of it, that's that right there is the part, because there is this system of philanthropy that people like to pretend is a real thing, and it's not. All of this is made up. So when people say, well, how do we move the money? It's like, we just do it. That's just it. We just do it. And I think all of this is tied around power. And that's the piece that people just are not willing to let go. And they think they think they're ready to share power, maybe even shift a little bit of power. And there has been, I think, this movement in philanthropy. I've been in philanthropy 4 years. I'm at the Satterberg Foundation in Seattle. And I think there's this piece around this idea for liberal foundations, family foundations that think, oh, we want to hire not just people of color, but people with lived experience. And then you hire people of lived experience where we're showing up and we have our narrative, our personal narrative, our family, our ancestral narrative. And all of that comes with, if we're working in community and you're hiring folks with lived experience from community, we know folks in community. And then it becomes kind of this tug of war of, how do you know, why do you know this person? Or why are you trying to give money to your friends? Or you actually speaking up and saying, well, no, actually, because of my own personal experience in this space, as a kid in this space and in this city, this is actually what could be useful, not the article you read. But now you don't want to trust me, and I thought that was the reason why you hired me. And really, it's not about trust, it's about you holding on to your power. And I think even just with losing Justice RBG, not only, I mean, she did so much work in the area of equality and gender, but the bigger thing is it shows us the holes in the system of that we're like, please don't die, we need you to be here for us. And how is it that we are all dependent on an old white woman, right, to say this is how like effed up the system is, to where we can lose one person on the Supreme Court and we are like terrified. That, like, what kind of system is this that has been upheld? And I think it's just, this is the time where it is like, put it all on the line. And I think that's why so many of us are leaving philanthropy. Manuela, what you said about like just the last 6 months, like I've quit my job twice during COVID, because it is in my body, right? Like somatically, like I feel it. And either we're gonna do this work for real or we're not. And I need you to tell me so I can leave. Because this is so much bigger, I think, right now. And Greg, you bringing up the increased spend, I mean, I think now is the time. Like, it's not we can't hoard the wealth, and people got to let go of their power. And I just think it is, damn, it's like, this is the work. This is the work. And the more and more we can get folks to have these honest conversations in spaces where it's not just us that believe it on a Zoom call, but we're getting to the folks that don't, they got to hear this. And we all just need to do it. And I think, and be supported in doing it and showing up authentically, and not be looked at as, well, you can't say that, or that's not how we show up, or you didn't write your comments down. And, like, it's like the code switching and all of that. We got to just be done with it and actually show up and move these resources, and if folks aren't committed to doing that, then none of us need to be here.
Thank you, Cece. And then Chris, can you share your comment into the group space? And then we'll go to Don in the stack.
Sure. I just thought I was literally typing. I've heard it. I've been on the AFF board now for a year, and I've heard it so many times. Now is the time. And literally, as I was hitting enter to send it, CC literally said, now is the time. So I had to throw the LOL in there. But as Greg said, it's been a common theme. I've been on the board for a year. I've heard it no less than 10 times from not only you guys as AFF staff, but I mean, everybody that we've been presented to in our several meetings. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Chris. And then Cece's point around, are we talking in a vacuum, or talking to people who are already on board and already believe? What is our work to get to the folks who are still on a learning journey or are resistant to these ideas that urgency is paramount, that our processes, if they're delaying a grant to the movement by 3 months, 6 months, that they're broken, the processes are broken, and that folks are literally, if it's not going to be us, who will it be really? In this season, if it's not the already committed racial justice funders, who's it going to be? So those are great questions. Can you, Don, jump in real quick? I saw you on the stack.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And thanks for having me in these 2 sessions this weekend. I always get a huge amount of inspiration and knowledge from these sessions. I just wanted to go back to a couple of things that folks said. I think Greg made a really good point about, this tension that we see a lot in family philanthropy, in particular, about trying to keep the foundation going for, many more decades, while at the same time recognizing that there are enormously urgent imperatives right now. And to Tynesha's point, like, we should act like we can win right now, like, in our time right here. And I think that this has been a major topic that the CERDNA board has grappled with. And you guys know that there is this tension between wanting to maintain the CERDNA Foundation's endowments so that the foundation can continue to do its work for many more decades and to have family programs and all those types of things. And at the same time, trying to do more. I've been sending you guys updates just about how that whole conversation is going. And, on the one hand, I can look at it as being a very challenging task because it's very time consuming, and Kelly can speak to this because Kelly's in it. But at the same time, I feel like this is all really healthy in terms of what we're experiencing now in philanthropy. I think that we are in, to just use a corny phrase, like a golden age of philanthropy, where this is a sector that never really had much pushback, not much scrutiny.
Yeah.
You have people writing books, and people really raising questions and asking, like, what should philanthropy's role be in the U.S.? And the thing that I think has been exciting for us at CERDNA has been to really interrogate every aspect of what we do, including this question about the endowment. So I think, that's been rewarding. It has been time consuming and frustrating at times, but there's a lot more work to do. I think that the AFF board and the kind of broader network of partners is super valuable to CERDNA. And what I'd like to see is, going back to another thing Tynesha said, if we really think that authentic, loving relationships is the way to go in terms of partnering with our external partners, like our grantee partners and others, I think that's a lesson for the CERDNA board, the AFF board. It would be great to have more CERDNA board members in these conversations. I don't think they need to be group conversations like this, but like, each of you has relationships with members of the CERDNA board, like whether it's through family or you're serving on a committee with them or whatnot, but like, trying to develop those personal relationships so that you can have these conversations and really interrogate, understanding their perspective and back and forth. I think that's a really valuable thing, and it could lead to more understanding of what we're all trying to do. So that's just one thing I want to put on the table here. And again, thanks a lot for all this interaction and learning.
Thank you, Don. Tynesha, did you have a response? Or I think I'm trying to keep track of this stack, guys.
No, Don and others, I just appreciate everything that you all are naming. CC, I appreciate everything that you all are naming. And I think one is Manuela mentioned it earlier, like spaces of principled struggle, like, and that takes time, right? It takes trust building, but it's an opportunity to say, that thing that y'all are doing, the thing that I'm doing, like let's struggle, because I don't really agree. Like, and how do we have conversations like that where we get to say, I think that is not the wisest decision, or that doesn't make sense, or it's actually contradicting what you want to do. And how do we create the space where that could be a place where it doesn't mean I dismiss, I reject, it just means I know and I believe that we could all show up better. And how do we struggle together? Because I want to help you figure that out. I think creating those spaces, and I think we have started even this space. And so I think it's, how do we do that? And how do we do that in the donor world, in the family foundation world, in the movement world, and realize that we're all part of a family trying to get free, and do that together. So that's one. And I think the second piece of this is really naming to a point that you said, CC, and others. This is the value that I am meditating on the most right now. And I've experienced it over the past 6 months, and I've had some painful consequences and some freeing ones, is what it means to show up in my fullest courage. To do that thing, to say that thing. What does it look like in that moment where I'm about to do or say that thing and it makes my heart stop? I'm cracking as my voice talks because I know that there's consequences on the other side and I'm scared. But the truth is that I know that it is worth it, because on what's at stake is freedom. Like freedom work for folk that deserve to be free, and freedom for my spirit, right? So that I can say, no, I did that thing, right? And so I think a part of what we're meditating on is, what is our highest and best selves is our most courageous selves, and how can we continue to show up in our courage and know that actually that will replenish our spirit more than it takes away. And so I love what you all are saying, because I think that this moment is calling us to be brave and to be our bravest. And what does that look like in our roles and in our leadership in philanthropy?
Thank you, Tynesha. I think, you know, definitely have felt like the Tin Man at times. But, you know, my family and friends always challenge me, you know, Manuela, no matter how big or small you may feel in regards to your positional power, the reality is you have access that none of us do. You have proximity that none of us do. And you have responsibility to justice. Never mind your job, never mind your institution and your title. And that can feel like a whole lot of weight. And I just want to kind of circle back to what Ray said earlier about the work, the burdens that I've seen some people of color and, you know, Native and Black folks carrying in their positional power in the roles in philanthropy. It has felt like, I'll speak for myself at times, like triple the responsibility. One, to speak truth to power. Two, to be that much more like open and compassionate and be online and on deck 24 hours a day. Three, to not lose access to the institution because of what that could mean about which groups may or may not be funded in the future. And we know that one program officer leaves, and when I entered the directorship role, I had literally everybody like, hey, what are you thinking? Are you gonna do a new strategy and we're all not gonna get funded? And I'm like, why? You guys know AFF, we would never roll like that. And honestly, they were like, well, that's what philanthropy does, because all it takes is one person to show up as a barrier. And suddenly that one person can yay or nay an entire strategy and accountability. And so what is our collective responsibility for the group? To encircle and embrace that person and support a principled decision about what it means to show up. Megan, I'm gonna pass it to you, and then we're gonna have closing thoughts and move on with the next element of our agenda. But just wanted to thank everybody this far.
Can I pass it to Ray, because I
Yeah.
had a chance to talk earlier?
Go ahead, Ray.
Sorry, not Ray, Edgar. You guys
Edgar.
are right to each other.
Right on. Go ahead, Edgar.
Oh, thanks, Megan. You know, I was just thinking about, you know, the comments around now is the time and what's different in this moment versus the Ferguson moment. It's different in the movement for a lot of reasons, right? It's a much more multiracial movement. And I think white folks, non-Black folks are beginning to, you know, are waking up to understand what Tynesha was saying, that this is not, it's about Black liberation, but all of our humanity is wrapped up in this. And when we had Ferguson, philanthropy was in this like, let's wait and see moment, right? Let's wait and see. Let's see if this passes over. Let's see how we, you know, before we respond. And that's kind of been our default position. And since then, there's been 2 years of reckoning and debating about even the legitimacy of this field and which side is this field even on? Is philanthropy, is it even possible for philanthropy to be on the side of liberation? So for me, I feel like we're just at this crossroads as a sector in terms of how we respond right now, right? And if we do not respond in this moment in the right ways, if we're not on the side of democracy, if we're not on the side of the movement for Black lives, we're going to lose public trust. It's already in question, right? But what we can do is actually, you know, if we respond in the right ways, we might be able to redeem ourselves as institutions or as a part of the social fabric of this country. But I think folks are going to look back and see that if we don't respond in the right way, we're going to be under scrutiny. And, you know, for the folks who are not on this call, the higher ups, you know, that are really sitting in the seats of power and control, I'm just thinking about how do we message this to them? How do we engage them to compel them to act differently? And for many of them, it is about their wealth. It is about risk, right? It's about financial incentives. And I just wonder if there's a way to help them understand that this moment, this opportunity they have to have major tax breaks, to be like in some way remotely connected to good work in the world is actually under threat, because the public is going to come for these coffers. They're going to come for these resources, and especially even more so if we're not standing on the right side of history.
Thank you so much, Edgar. And so we're going to do a one-word checkout, y'all. Start just, where are you at this moment in this conversation? I'm going to start with Kelly, and I'll go through my squares, Kelly.
Gratitude, just real gratitude for my AFF family members, all of you, for the invitation to bring in other funders and create spaces for these kinds of principled struggles. Tynesha and Erin, you are an inspiration. So gratitude to have been included, and hope that others will come into this space more often.
Thanks, Kelly. Melissa? Yeah, you have a one word. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was
one word
typing. I feel so empowered.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Yes. Nayoka?
Yes to all that Tynesha and Erin and others shared with us during this conversation. Yes. Exclamation point, exclamation point.
Thanks, Nayoka. Megan?
We're all cheating and saying more than one. So grateful and inspired by Tynesha and Erin in this conversation.
Thank you, Megan. Julia?
I'm going to go with informed. I feel a lot more informed, and just it's nice to hear points of view from other funders and from other people outside of our group. I know we talk a lot, but it's just nice to bring in other POVs. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Don?
Thank you again. I want to say that as I look at the screen here, I see the future. I see strong leadership, and I want to reiterate the whole point about engaging and interrogating and in loving and authentic relationships. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Ray?
Sorry. I would say resolved. I just feel really personally like, the path and journey that I've taken over the last few months. I feel like it is the right one, and that's because I know that people like all of you exist, and that ultimately the arc of philanthropy is going to be one that, to Edgar's point, bends to community need. That is just a matter of time.
Ray, thank you, not just for what you shared today, but for your act of courage on behalf of Black-led organizations and Black women at Chan Zuckerberg. And we know you took a hit, and we are grateful for your courage. Thank you. Cece?
Purpose. I think just being reminded of why we're in this work. And we got folks putting it on the line. So we owe it to the community. So thanks all for being here.
Thank you, Cece. Molly.
Sorry, I didn't have my finger hovered over mute. I feel fortified, like we have our work to do, stronger and really connected. Thank you all. It's so nice to meet so many new, soon-to-be strong partners in our work together. So thank you for including Butler and our trustees and staff. We're really, really grateful.
Molly, bring me back some of that Moroccan aroma, please.
It's already in my bag. I'll pack some fresh ones before I come home though.
Molly T.
Not used to two Mollies. And
no, I was like,
did I take the, oh, I'm not even.
What? You were good. The Mollies were in sync. It was good.
I'm fired up. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to engage in conversation and create community within the funder community.
Thanks, Molly. Greg.
Fiery.
As your hair blows in the wind. I love it, Greg. Good. Now. Edgar.
My word is also fired up. I really believe that this group can figure out how to push through all of this mess to really show a better way to do this work and to be in right relationship with the community.
Right on, Edgar. We can push through the mess. Yes. Meg.
I'll say focused. I just feel like I have a lot more clarity than I have in a while right now. So feeling good.
Thank you, Meg. Jennifer.
I'm inspired and motivated.
Yes. I love all the affirmations I see. Go ahead, Jennifer. Libby, welcome. So blessed to have you with us.
Thank you, and thank you for including me today. And I have gratitude for the learning today that I will take I'm not in the world of philanthropy now, but into other facing change networks that I'm involved with.
Thank you, Libby. Emily.
I am feeling grateful and inspired, but honestly, I'm also feeling a little nervous and scared. So, more of the positive than the negative, but.
Thank you, Emily. This group can hold all of it. So thank you. Saida.
I'm excited and hopeful for the possibilities of what committing to liberation can lead to.
Yes, thank you, Saida. Caitlin.
I would say energized and accountable, just holding ourselves accountable to the movement.
Thank you, Caitlin. Lindsay.
I think the word I'm going to go with is weight. I feel the weight of the responsibility. I feel the weight of the movement, and I feel fired up and I feel energized. And like, when you like do something really hard, it feels really good. But I also, this is the reckoning, right? Like we're in it. We have to be a part of it. Like that's a lot of, I feel that pressure, but I'm excited that I feel just this group in this last hour, just like growing stronger because of coming to the table to have the conversation, and I can't wait to do more.
Right on. Thank you, Lindsay. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I guess my words would be ready to go and educated and empowered. I feel empowered when I'm educated, and you guys taught me a lot this weekend, especially this morning, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Well, with that, you guys, I'm going to thank our presenters, a little, hand clap, snaps, all the things, Tynesha, Erin, Ray, and Megan for sharing your personal stories. Our friends at Butler for joining us and journeying with us. And our elder wise trailblazers from the Cerna Foundation, thank you for being with us and for staying in this work. It's going to take all of us, so stay connected, you guys. And we're going to take a 5-minute break and allow our guests to exit. But once again, our deepest appreciations for you all. Take good care.
Thanks, y'all.
Right on. So AFF will be back at 12:55 for the next portion of our meeting. So take a quick break, everybody, and we'll be right back.